it's 17 o'clock, so I can start. So great to see so much people are interested in the NatTable. At least I have heard some maybe more interesting talks for myself. But okay, what we are talking about, or what I want to talk about, is the Nebula NatTable. A simple, no, not a simple, an extended table framework. To introduce myself, in short, my name is Dirk Fauth. I'm a senior consultant for the BeOne in Stuttgart, and I'm a Nebula NatTable committer. So if you want to contact me on any issue of this presentation or on NatTable itself, feel free to contact me. What I want to talk about today is, first I want to clear what's NatTable itself. So what is this composite I'm talking about? To understand its architecture, I'm trying to give an introduction what our other table widgets in the Eclipse ecosystem are about, how their architecture is about, and what is the difference in NatTable. Giving some short introduction how NatTable works in the back, and giving you an introduction on what we are planning for the future. So what's NatTable and why is it called NatTable? It's frequently asked questions, why is NatTable called NatTable? It's because the initial creator called it, dedicated it to his girlfriend named Natalie. That's a few years ago, I guess. Justin, you can correct me. Since then, we did some major refactorings, and now we're simply call it or use it as an acronym for it's not a table. And I also heard of some guys who were looking at the table and saying, oh no, not another table. We don't need this. But in fact, it is not another table. It is a framework for building tables, grids, and at least trees that can handle large data sets. And when I'm speaking about large data sets, I'm speaking of max int number of columns to max int number of rows. So I'm speaking of really large data sets. I heard of guys, max int doesn't fit, that's not enough, we need long. I haven't used such huge data sets in terms of columns and rows already, but yeah. Some guys need this, and it provides a lot of functionality out of the box. Speaking of large data sets, I also have to say that we can do this without any impact on performance, because it was the main goal for the table to handle large data sets without issues on performance, as it is used in the financial sector to show real-time data updates on financial stockings. So this is where it originally came from. You're looking that skeptical, Justin. Everything's okay, so thank you. There's another committer on the project. So, as I said, this is a framework for creating tables. So there are a lot of different use cases to use the NatTable. I've shown just a few. At the top, you can see a simple error log, which only shows one message decorated with an icon. Really important on that thing is that it supports different row heights compared to the native SWT widgets, which doesn't support this. We have a risk matrix, which was one of my first projects. I don't know if I could ever implement this with a JFace table. Probably it is possible, but it was easy. No? Okay. And this is the most usual use case, a real huge table. This is an example from our examples, I guess, showing stockings. It's fully editable. We have a filter row. We have column grouping. It is sortable. We have a lot of editing features, and we have this automatic update in the back. So this application is an example for connecting to a web server, I guess, or to a financial server, updating the data in real time in this large table and showing you which data was updated. It's the blinking update layer for anyone who's interested in that. To understand the difference from NatTable to the other tables, I want to shortly introduce what are other tables all about, or how the architecture is there. Looking at the Eclipse ecosystem, we are finding the SWT and JFace viewers. We have the Nebula Grid for showing other tables. We have the Nebula X viewer, which is special dedicated to trees, which is an extension to Tree Viewer, in fact. While doing the research, I also find the K-table and the Jarray table. In fact, I never heard of the Jarray table before, just found it last week. Both are inactive since a few years, so I didn't look at them further. So, simply looking at the JFace table, a table viewer, you normally write code like this. You're creating your table viewer, and then you're adding columns. A column object for every column you want to show. So if you want to create a table with a huge amount of columns, well, you're creating in a line of code hell. There are thousands of lines of code simply creating new columns, as you have to attach a label provider for every of your columns, and you have to provide the editing support. So you're getting thousands of lines of code. I'm really talking about huge tables. So compared to what I'm showing next, JFace tables and also the Nebula Grid, which is based on the table viewer, you're creating your table column by column. You're attaching one column to the other. And you're creating several kinds of objects. So for every column, if your table needs to be editable, you will have at least 3 objects. The column object itself, you will have the label provider, which is mixing data and styling, and you have an editing support. Another downside is that the table viewer is using the native OS widgets, so there you have the problem, of course, that the native OS widget in Windows doesn't support different row heights, for example. So if you want to have greater row heights, then the whole table is growing, and not only those rows you want to grow in height. Creating a NatTable is kind of different. This is a special example, as I'm using a reflective data provider at the back. But what you can realize here is that we don't create every column by itself. We're just creating the table. So what's really behind this is we have a different architecture. As you've seen before, the JFace table viewer is created column by column, and this column-based approach needs you to have a clear definition of the data structure and how the table should be built. Using this approach, or using the approach of the NatTable itself, gives you more flexibility in working with the table at runtime. So in NatTable, we are stacking up layers for different functionalities. As you can see in this diagram, at the bottom, we are having a data layer, which is used to handle the data in our grid. We are having, for example, the column reorder layer, which enables reordering the columns within the table by drag and drop, and you can simply add this functionality by adding the layer into your grid. We are having the grid layer here. There's the viewport layer handling the visible part of the table. And what is also very important to know about the NatTable, that NatTable doesn't extend JFace. So NatTable is really a custom painted table. It extends Canvas at the moment. So we are completely free from any native OS widgets downsides. Well, I guess I'm running too fast. Yeah, I'm running too fast. Wasn't there anything else to say? Well, I'm speaking too fast, but that leaves me to show at least some examples, I guess. Yeah. If I'm running too fast, I can show examples. That's why I created them. So here I have some table viewer created, and I'm just creating 4 columns to it. And having this show line numbers, so I have 30 lines of code for simply creating this table. And I created some example for the Nebula grid. It's the same, just using grid table viewer. And using the Nebula NatTable, it looks really different. So if you want to migrate from the JFace table viewer to the Nebula NatTable, you have a lot to do. You'll have to switch your whole implementation. And I also getting frequently asked the question, can I use my iLabel provider or can I use my editing support? Is it possible to use whatever I used before in my JFace viewer? And I have to say, no, you can't. Because we are using a completely different approach, so we don't want to support these kind of things. Yeah, showing this example will give you this view, having 4 tabs for the JFace table, and I added the number of milliseconds to create this. It's about 10,000 objects I'm creating in the back before. So, okay, the virtual table is of course really, really fast, coming with some other issues. We have the Nebula grid, which has become slower than the JFace table, which wasn't intended by the Nebula grid, I guess. At least Tom said this before I talked to him. And looking at the Nebula NatTable, we are about 141 milliseconds. So we're a little bit slower than the virtual table, but we have a lot more functionality. And we won't increase the more columns we have. If we increase the number of columns, as far as I know, the virtual table, the JFace table, gets slower too. Yeah, okay, thank you.
So the virtual table is not totally virtual, it's pseudo-virtual.
Okay, so we are virtual table, we are really virtual, we are not creating anything. No, we have a list in the back, so I guess we have the same issue.
Not as much, you're not getting that figure right now, you've got a list.
Okay, so, okay, thanks. Okay, getting back to the, getting back to the slides. As you notice, this is my first presentation, so I'm kind of nervous. Okay, getting the data to the NatTable is also kind of different, but it's not that difficult. Looking to the table viewer, you're adding a label provider. And your label provider is, well, if you implement it like this, it's a styled label provider, so you're mixing how the data should be shown and what data should be shown in your table. In NatTable, we are mixing this. We have a separation of concerns there. So we have a data provider. As I said earlier, the data layer is responsible for handling the data in the NatTable. And underneath, we have an iData provider and an iColumn accessor. You don't need an iColumn accessor, but you need the iData provider, which is necessary to get the data into your table. So this one is the connection to your model in the back. You can think of the, well, I'll show this on the next slide. So this is also the fact why we don't support data binding in NatTable, because the NatTable really works on the data you're showing. Every modification is putting through the model directly. So if you change the data, I can show this here. Looking at this Nebula grid, I'm setting Lenny to be married. He becomes married also in the NatTable, but he isn't married in the JFace because I didn't call the refresh on the JFace table on any edit action. But as the Nebula, yeah? Well, that depends on your architecture. Normally, you would register some property change listeners that do the update. That's what the blinking update layer is doing. I showed this before. This one here. This table is connected to a background service, and It is the Blink layer is using a property update mechanism who is notified if the data is changing. So when you're, the Blink layer is one popular example for this issue, that the table is updated automatically, but without the cost of updating everything. You can really specify which cell only should be updated, so this is more performant.
So actually you don't need a data binding because you are working on the model.
That's the fact, yeah. That's what I wanted to say. We don't need data binding because we're working on the model directly. But we got that questions, how can I add my data binding to NatTable? And then we have to say it's not possible, you don't need it. That's why I'm doing this here, talking about what's the main differences, to raise this understanding. What we also have is GlazedLists support. GlazedLists is an implementation of lists that calls itself is more performant than the native list implementation, and it also supports then an event mechanism. What you don't have if you're using the native list in Java, you don't have events. So if you're removing an item or adding new items, you don't have this. You don't get notified. It's GlazedLists adds this event mechanism, so you're noticing when the data is changing, or when the list itself is changing. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, it's the collection. It's the list collection. It's an extension of the Java util list, and it implements Java util list. I guess, yeah, it must implement. I guess so. And it also brings some other features like a sorting functionality in the back, filtering in the back, and at least trees in the back. This is what the functionality in NatTable is based on. So if you're sorting, well, sorting also is working without GlazedLists, but filtering is working only, or the filter row is currently only working with the GlazedLists in the back, and the tree is based on GlazedLists. So here I want to show the interfaces for an iData provider and the iColumn accessor. As you can see here, the iData provider is the data provider which knows both axes. So you can go on column index, row index, so you can walk down the table. This is what I created an own implementation of iData provider for the risk matrix I showed before in the examples. Normally, you have a list of data, a list of persons, as the example showed before. So you're using, or you're supposed to use our list data providers, or GlazedList data providers, and only attaching your column accessor, which compared to the JFace viewer approach, really works on the data itself. If you're having a look at a data provider of a JFace table, then this table provider normally looks like this. You're getting a viewer cell. This is also why NatTable doesn't support those label providers, because we don't have viewer cells. And then you're getting the element out of the cell, so you can work on the information you're having there. This is completely different in NatTable, as we are working here on the object itself. So we're type safe at this point. And it's not that complex to override or create your own iColumn accessor or even an iData provider, because you're working on the object itself. As I said, we're using an approach of separation of concerns. So the one thing is we are working on the data with the data layer, the data provider, and so on. And then we have the styling. And the whole NatTable is configurable completely. For this, we introduced a config registry where we are configuring everything NatTable uses, like the styling, bindings, and so on. So, as I said, the NatTable is a custom painted widget, and so it can be painted. We are having different painters for images, for combo boxes, text, of course. We have passwords, painters. The border painter, well, there are a bunch of painters, which are doing the painting itself, and we're having the concept of styles. So you can attach styles that are then interpreted by the painter so they know what to render. Very interesting stuff there is we have a conditional configuration concept. So it is possible to add labels to your cells, which are then interpreted by the painter at runtime. So, for example, the blink layer example, when the update occurs from the back, there is a special label attached to the cell that is updated, telling, hey, this cell was updated, and this is immediately reflected by the NatTable by configuration. Yeah, there are several types of conditional configurations, and in my opinion, this is a really strong feature in NatTable. And you can also add bindings to your table, so you can have special key bindings. So what should happen on pressing any numeric key or any key combination, opening pop-up menus or whatever you need. And there are a lot of supported functions. As I initially said, we're supporting a huge amount of functionality in NatTable out of the box. This is, well, a summation of the most important one, I guess. So we fully support editing with validators, editing rules. We have conditional styling, sorting, column and row grouping, which I haven't found any table widget that supports row grouping. Column height show, and what else? And there are a lot of functionality hiding in the back. Like one nice feature I came across a few months ago are dynamic combo boxes content, dependent on which cell you are in. And there are a lot more. Justin is always telling me that there is a so cool feature I have to use. It's already there in NatTable. But this is not enough for us. We are still working on it, although it's quite stable in productive use and have a lot of functionality. We are still working on it because we are all feeling quite uncomfortable in some places. Like one thing is smooth scrolling. Currently the NatTable is, when you're scrolling the NatTable, you're always jumping one cell or one column after each other. We had a request on that, and it was implemented a few months ago. So our project lead is currently working on it to make it into the current branch so we can make a release and bring the smooth scrolling into it. And one thing we are all really uncomfortable with is the huge amount that you have to bring in to configure your NatTable. You have to, well, when I'm speaking of configuration, there are a few aspects. One aspect is your data model. You have to create your data provider by hand. It's all programmatically. One thing is, of course, the styling. And another huge thing is the creation or the layer stack, what's the word for? The constructing of your table, which layers are playing with each other. So we are doing a plan. I'm coming to this soon. So, but the first thing is we want to add some simplifications to the configuration, like a theme style configuration. Currently, every layer is styling itself. So if you're planning to do your own styling, you have to replace several stylings in several layers, which is really annoying. So we are planning to bring a more general style configuration, which will ease this. Yeah, and for the 1.0 coming in the first quarter 2013, there are also some smaller refactorings and some enhancements we can't name yet because they're project-driven. What you also should know is that we are planning to release 4 stable versions each year, so there should be one release each quarter. At least this is the plan of our project lead, and the last year we missed only one because of the move to Nebula. So we're quite stable at this point. So the really news in this talk is that we have been talked about a NatTable 2.x. And in this version would become a great refactoring. So we are doing a new branch as we won't be compatible with the older versions, because we're trying to benefit from Eclipse 4. So the first thing currently, Nebula NatTable is dependent on Eclipse 3.5 upwards, no, 3.5. And so we will move to Eclipse 4, to the Eclipse 4 platform with the next release, because we want to introduce dependency injection and modeling. So we want to reduce the configuration efforts you have to make. In the first place, this doesn't mean we will kill the 1.0 branch. So what's possible will be parallel, and there is currently no plan for a 2.x release. We're in design phase. We're looking what we can do, and I'm getting the message that I'm out of time. Cool. I thought I was too fast. Yeah. As you can see here, we are trying to add CSS styling, support different rendering engines. This is what we are planning to do. But as I said, there is no current release date. We're in design phase and have to look what's possible and what's not possible. But we definitely want to reduce the configuration efforts. If you have any further questions, feel free to ask me. You can go to our Nebula NatTable website. The documentation there is, yes, as I'm writing it, it's not complete, but most informations are there. Okay, I have to add some more documentation, I know. Feel free to discuss with us at the forum or the mailing list. And there are also some articles with additional examples at our company website that may help you getting started with NatTable. So as I'm running out of time, but there is no session afterwards, feel free to ask. Yeah?
Is there a built-in layout for EMF models so that I can, let's say, take a list of entities and show it over the table?
We haven't currently used this, but if you're looking at the forum, there are 2 users who have implemented it with EMF. They're having their model in EMF. Yeah. How native is the look?
And feel on different platforms. I mean, you try to emulate the native look and feel?
No, we have a special, also it's completely styled yourself. So in fact, I'm not very happy with the default styling. As you can see here, this is the default styling that comes with the NatTable. I don't like this because it's far away from anything I know. But it's quite easy to override this.
But, I mean, you should use the native styling hints on different platforms like background color, label color, and I mean, these kind of things, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. I'm looking at this when I'm implementing the theme configurations, so I can bring up some predefined theme configurations you can choose from. I'm looking at this.
It should depend on if I run the Mac, it should look a bit different than on Windows or on...
Yes, you're right. Completely agree.
And
Yeah.
sorry, can I also say it's also very easy to start. There's a styled example with there's a whole load of examples, and styled examples also show if you're running Windows, it's got like Office look and feel, kind of the blue, on heavy, Raven, everywhere. So to make it look how we want it.
Yes, I guess he was just, as my colleague says, you can configure it the way you want, but the default configuration should be maybe more relying on the platform you're running with. That's true. Yeah.
Well, I have a question about trees. I may have missed it in the beginning. You support trees in tree tables?
Yes. I'm running an example here. This is something I'm working on private, a resource bundle editor for Eclipse. So you're seeing there's no table yet, but then now there is one. It's completely built on GlazedLists. So you need to get a bit familiar with the GlazedList tree lists format, which isn't that difficult, in fact. And yeah, then you can have trees. That's in production. This is the 0.9 release.
So it's used out in the field somewhere?
This is no, this is not, but I have a productive tree project out there, yes. At least I'm working on 3 projects using the NatTable in heavy. Like the risk matrix, a properties editor using the tree, and simple BeOne access. So simple data models, but containing large amounts of data. And also the error log view with the different row heights. This was also something really annoying. Any further questions? Yeah? It's SWT, and I guess there is a JFace dependency because of some editors, but have to review that. Yeah, we can have a look. Any further questions? Okay, so thank you for attending.